Self-care literally just means to care for yourself. Like if you think about the breakdown of those words, self-care, it's care of the self. But there's really become sort of this negative connotation, not just around the term, but around moms doing things for themselves. Really, when we break down what that actually means to take care of yourself, it makes it seem like self-care is a necessary thing rather than this extra thing.
Welcome to the Worthy Mother podcast, where we discuss all things identity, self-compassion, and fulfillment within and beyond motherhood. I'm Emily Rose Hardy, a mindset and self-love coach for moms. I am a firm believer that to be able to take care of our children, we must take care of ourselves first. This is not a parenting podcast. No, this is a podcast where we will challenge the societal expectations of what it means to be a mom, demystify the perfect mom myth, and learn to love ourselves. You are worthy, mama. Let's do this.
Hello. It's the first solo episode of 2024. Here we are, and I am going to be talking all about self-care, which, if you are a regular listener to the Worthy Mother podcast, you know is one of my very favorite things to talk about. Like, I literally talk explicitly about self-care with every single guest that we have on the podcast. We have our self-care snippets every other Friday. It is that important to my mission and really just the mission of the show in supporting moms to make sure that we're all taking care of ourselves. Today, we are going to be talking about misconceptions of self-care and what it actually means to practice self-care, especially for busy moms like us. But before we fully jump into that conversation, I want to ask just a few things of you. First of all, if you are not already subscribed to the show, please take a quick moment to do that. Wherever you listen, or if you like to watch and you're watching on YouTube, just hit subscribe, and that way you will be reminded of new episodes every week. You can make sure not to miss out, and it really does help the podcast out as well. Another quick ask to start the new year, I would absolutely love it if you would leave a rating and review. So many of you tune in week after week, and it is such a cool thing when you can let me and potential listeners know why you tune in. I truly appreciate your ratings and reviews, so thank you in advance. With that said, let's get into the episode. So self-care is crucial for everyone. Just going to lay that out there. But I'm going to say that it is especially crucial for moms. We are constantly meeting the needs of others, and we need to be cared for in that process, right? We need to be looking out for ourselves. I am a huge believer in normalizing self-care for moms, like truly making it the norm for mothers to take care of themselves and to make that a priority, right? Instead of kind of this pattern of self-sacrificing, changing the narrative to be it's normal to take care of yourselves and to make sure your needs are being met. And that is why I am spending this time here for this episode talking about what it might be that's holding you back from making that happen in your own life. So I want to get into the misconceptions of self-care that I see quite frequently when I'm having these conversations or just out in the world, the narrative of the world that kind of pushes these misconceptions of what it means to practice self-care on us, right? So the first misconception that I'm going to talk about is that self-care is a luxury. This is kind of the idea that only people who have like an excess of money or time or live that life of luxury deserve self-care and really are the only ones who should be like making that a priority or will make that a priority. It's kind of this idea that it looks like spa days and massages and lavish vacations and all kinds of other things that I just don't have the extra funds for or the time to make happen, right? It's these like luxurious extras. And it's not a necessary thing. We see self-care as this gratuitous thing that like really kind of makes it feel selfish because we're making a choice to take care of ourselves and do these lavish things. And that takes away from maybe the time that we are supposed to be spending with our kids or, in our work or whatever else it is that we think we should be doing instead. When self-care is kind of seen as this luxury, it makes it feel like choosing to tap into self-care is choosing like this extra luxury stuff, right? It's not something that feels like we are all worthy of. It's, again, for those who can afford it with their money and their time and all of that. So, my take, kind of, hammering at this misconception and turning it around, is that self care is for everyone. It's honestly crucial for everyone. We all need to be taken care of. It's not just a luxury. It's not just for people that, live a luxurious life. It's something that we are all worthy of. And it makes a difference not only in our quality of life, but also in how we show up for others. When we are taken care of, we show up differently, right? We're able to show up for others because we're being taken care of. Our needs are met. So, the second misconception I see is that self care has to be something extra. This is a big one that makes committing to self care hard for some people, especially moms who have a lot going on and a lot of on their plates, right? When it feels like we have to add more to our plates to be able to practice self care, it's like we have to make time for self care. We have to make the energy for self care. And it feels, when we think about self-care in that way, like self-care has to be some event that happens. It's like a weekly workout class with childcare that we have to like plan and, make happen. And it's just a lot of extra work. Or a full day off, and we have to figure out how to get that full day off. And there's a lot of logistics and planning, and it's a lot of effort. Or something like adding a full morning routine or committing to journaling every night before bed. It's like we have to commit to these extra actions that we have to take, right? And when you're already busy and have a lot going on, that can make it really hard to actually like engage in self-care if like it feels like it's one more thing on your plate. So my take on this, kind of again getting at this misconception, is that self-care can absolutely look like these, quote, extra things in our lives, but it doesn't have to. And not all self-care is an action like this, right? Like that weekly workout class or the morning routine that happens every morning. There are ways to incorporate self-care at different levels, and it doesn't always have to be adding some extra thing to your plate. And when we can start to recognize that it can fit into our lives in a lot of different ways, and be more of a normal thing instead of like just adding extra tasks to our plate, it can really make a big difference in how we're able to engage in self care. So, on a similar note, the third misconception is that self care is basically like a to do list of things. Again, self care can feel like a task or a series of tasks that you have to complete. And we can consider tasks as basic as taking a shower self care, right? Like when you take a shower, you're caring for yourself. But also things like scheduling and attending appointments, working out, reading, getting outside daily, etc., etc. It's like, okay, there's like all these things that we can do to take care of ourselves. So we do the thing and we check it off, and then we've completed the self-care. And it's like, okay, I'm caring for myself because I took a shower, I got outside today, all these things. And my take on that is like, yes, we can build habits and have routines to make sure that we are caring for ourselves. There are absolutely actions that we can and should take to practice self care. But really, a lot of what makes up self care is the mindset behind it. It's not just a one and done thing. It's not just some checklist that you've completed the tasks and now you've done self care. Cool. Caring for yourself is not just checking off boxes. It is really intentionally making sure that your needs are being met. We're going to talk more about this, but it's really like checking in and caring for our ever changing needs as a person. So it's really important to recognize that it isn't just a to do list and that it's not just a one and done task that once it's completed, we're good to go, right? And feeling like it is can make it not only feel like a burden to practice self-care, but it also makes it so that it's not as effective, right? You're just doing these things, going through the motion, but not really sure if that's what you need in the moment. So finally, the fourth misconception that I want to just address right here is that self-care is something besides caring for yourself. Self-care literally just means to care for yourself. Like if you think about the breakdown of those words, self-care, it's care of the self. But there has become this kind of essence around the term, and it feels like it's abandoning everyone else's needs when you're caring for yourself or giving yourself more than you deserve. And there's really become sort of this negative connotation not just around the term, but around moms doing things for themselves. And really, when we break down the fact that it just means taking care of yourself, like to practice self care is to take care of yourself, what that actually means to take care of yourself, it makes it seem like self care is a necessary thing rather than this extra thing. So we have to be careful that when we're thinking about self care for ourselves, recognizing that it really is just caring for ourselves. That's really what we're talking about. And when we can be clear on that definition, it can make it a lot easier to feel like it's worth our time and effort because we can recognize that, like, okay, we have to be taken care of to be able to take care of others and to be able to like live the lives that we want to live. So that leads us really nicely into the next part of this episode. Those are the misconceptions that I'm going to leave you with. But now I really want to move into explicitly defining what I see as self care, what this means. Because again, if we're talking about self care as the caring of ourselves, what does that look like? How can we like use that definition to inform our mindset around self care and make it more of a normal thing in our lives? Because again, when we're making it a normal thing in our lives as mothers, the impact is huge, right? The impact can be massive, not only for ourselves and how we're able to show up in the world and like engage in the world and in our work and in our families and everything with a different level of presence and like bringing all of ourselves to our lives, basically, right? And that's really how we live fulfilled lives that are representative of who we are and what we want out of life, right? So let's get into like really looking at the nitty gritty of what self care is and how I like to look at self care to really understand what we're talking about and how this fits into our lives. So, like I said, we're looking at self care as caring for self, caring for the self, caring for ourselves, right? And when I think about caring for ourselves, it's really the meeting of our own needs. So you think about caring for your children, that's an easy one to think about. And really, what that means is meeting their needs. And we can acknowledge that there are different needs that they have, right? There's the needs like we have to feed our kids because they have a need to eat. We have to bathe our kids because they have a need of hygiene. We have to provide our kids with somewhere to live because they have the need of having the safety of shelter and warmth, right? Then we also have to show up for them and care for them in other ways, right? We have to provide psychologically safe spaces for them. We want to be able to show up and help them regulate their emotions and work through issues at school and whatever it is. There's all these things that they may need from us. And in caring for them, we are providing for those needs. I think we can all like understand that when it comes for caring for others. So then when it comes to self-care and the caring of ourselves, it really is meeting our own needs. And as you see in the example of like what it means to care for our kids, needs aren't just one thing. It's not just like, oh, we need to be feeding ourselves and sleeping and drinking water and we're good to go. We actually, as human beings, have like a plethora of needs that are important to acknowledge and examine and take care of if they need to be taken care of, right? If they're not being met. So, one tool that really helps me look at the different types of needs we have and understand like how to approach self-care and how to approach the meeting of those needs is by looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, I want to just kind of lay the foundation here. If you have or haven't heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's something that a lot of us learned in school, right? It's a fairly common theory or principle of what it means to have needs as a human being. There is some debate on how it's followed. I'm going to get into like the structure of the hierarchy, but regardless of that debate of like whether it's exactly the way it was laid out and presented originally or not, this is a great representation of how our needs are really diverse and there are a lot of different kinds of needs and they are all needs. It's not just like needs versus wants. These are needs we have as human beings. So, to kind of paint the picture of what Maslow's hierarchy of needs is, we can think of a pyramid. And there's the base foundation at the bottom. And then, as you go up, it's smaller portions. Just imagine a pyramid, imagine a triangle, and you can kind of picture this. So, at the bottom of the triangle, we have our basic needs. These are those foundational needs that have to be met, right? To be able to literally wake up and survive as a human being. So those start with our biological and physiological needs. Again, these are things that have to be met. We have to have these needs met to literally survive. These are things like food. You have to be feeding your body to be able to survive, right? We can't go, I don't know what it is, like 8 days or something without food, whatever the science is behind that. We have to eat. We have to be feeding ourselves. We also need water. We have to be drinking water. We have to stay hydrated. And there's like the basic, like, yes, you have to have water to survive, but then it's like also, if you're dehydrated, you might have enough to survive, but you might get a headache because you're not drinking enough water, right? So, like, really making sure those basic needs are getting met is important. Rest is another basic need. We all need sleep and rest to be able to survive. Humans cannot survive literally without sleep. If you don't sleep, you can't survive. You will fall asleep, right? And then there's some other basic needs we have. Oxygen. Obviously, we need to be able to have oxygen to survive. Our bodies fail without oxygen. Shelter and warmth. We have to be able to be in homeostasis with like warmth, and your body temperature has to be at a certain point. Otherwise, your body will fail and you can't survive. So easy enough, right? There are biological, physiological needs we have as human beings to survive. And if those are not met, you can't really climb higher up the pyramid because you have to have those needs met. Right above that, still in this category of basic needs, but towards the bottom of the pyramid, is safety and security needs. This includes things like having a place to live, having secure employment and, financial security, your family being safe, like physically safe from harm, and your health. You think about things where maybe someone gets sick and the world kind of stops and nothing else matters, it feels like. It's because your focus kind of goes to meeting those safety and security needs. If you are struggling to find a place to live, you might not be focused on, your friendships and things like that. If all your time and energy is going into securing a place to live because you need that, then again, to kind of meet those biological and physiological needs. If you are having a hard time financially, again, there might be other needs that are going unmet as you're trying to put effort into that. So we can see those are pretty foundational and important for humans. As we move up the pyramid, we have our psychological needs. And this is where it's important to acknowledge that these are also needs we have. Just because you're getting enough sleep, just because you are eating food and drinking water and surviving doesn't mean your needs are being met. It's not like these psychological needs are just things we want that are extra. They are needs we have. So those are things like love and belonging needs. That's your friendships. We need the sense of belongingness. We need the connection as humans, our intimate relationships, our sense of belonging to a group. We need to have trust in others because we kind of rely on other people. There are just things we need as humans that have to do with our connections with other people that I really do think sometimes we don't actually see as a need. We see it as like extra. And especially in individualistic societies like the United States, where it's kind of fend for yourself and, I can do this on my own. And for a lot of mothers, that's a huge piece of the narrative, right? Like, I should be able to do this on my own. We failed to see the love and belonging needs as needs. And so when it feels like we're alone and we don't feel like we should be putting effort into changing that because our effort should go towards our kids, it's important to reframe that and recognize, like, no, that is a need I have, something I need, and I can focus on getting that need met through self care, right? Whatever that looks like. And then we have our esteem needs. These are the next rung up on the pyramid. And that is our self esteem, which is how we feel about ourselves. And then also our reputation and respect. So, status and prestige with how others perceive us. Those are needs we have. And again, it's like if you think about like belonging to a group and the importance of that when, life wasn't the way it is in current society, you needed to belong to a group to be able to survive, to meet those basic biological, physiological needs of having food and being safe from, outside threat. It makes sense then that we have the need to have others respect us and see us as someone who belongs. But then also there's like the actual self-esteem and like how we see ourselves. And I think recognizing that like it's okay to want more for yourself and to want to be seen with status and prestige, like that's a normal thing for humans to want and to need, to crave in that way. It kind of makes it easier to see that like going after that for yourself and trying to get that need met is legitimate. It's a legitimate thing that you have as a human, and it's not something to be like ashamed of. And then one more step up, kind of the top of the pyramid, and this can be broken into different sections, but it's kind of the self fulfillment, self actualization needs. The achieving your full potential as a human, focused on self growth. It's not as connected with the opinions of other people, right? It's really like coming to your own sense of self and like purpose in the world, creating things, doing things that are like beyond the interactions we have with others and things like that. So again, there is debate on how this pyramid works. It's like one of those things where it's like just because you have a safety and security need not being met, does that mean you cannot be going after another need? But really, like it does make sense, right? That when you are not having the basic needs met, your focus cannot be on those higher up needs because you literally need to be able to survive to be able to then go after more. I think about just in the classroom, my background as a classroom teacher, there was a lot of brain science I learned about while getting my master's degree on just how students have to feel like physically and psychologically safe in the classroom to be able to learn. Their learning needs are not going to be met if their safety needs are not being met. And so it makes a lot of sense. If you don't have access to water, you're probably not going to be going after this prestige goal of, making sure that people see you with status and things like that because you have bigger fish to fry. You have more important needs that need to be met, those foundational needs. The basic needs are huge. They have to come first. We have to make sure those basic needs are being met. That's part of self care, caring for ourselves, making sure we're getting enough food, making sure we're getting water, making sure we're getting rest, making sure that we are taking care of ourselves and like doing the things we need to survive and that we have the financial security and that we have the health and safety, right? But needing time for your own personal growth is a true need. That's really the point I want to make here is that like doing things for you beyond getting your basic needs met, it's not just some extra special thing. It's a need that we have as human beings. It's a need that needs to be fulfilled and met. And so focusing on self-care, it's not some selfish extra thing. It's not some luxury that's just for people who have the time and money for it. It's something that we all need to do to be able to like have our needs met as a human. And then to be able to show up in our lives and for our children in the way that we want to, right? So, we're going to kind of move into the next part of this and talk about what self care then can look like for busy moms, because I know that that's kind of the hardest part. You might feel like, yeah, I want to be taking care of myself. I want to be doing the things. I want to be showing up. And that sounds great. But like, what does that actually look like in my life? And unfortunately, I don't have like one blanket answer for everything. There's just not a way for me to answer that and say, you know what? You can get all your needs met by doing XYZ, and it's not going to add any more to your plate and you're good to go. Partly because all of our needs are different. We all have different needs. We all have different things that we need in our lives and that we want in our lives, right? And so my biggest piece of advice and the biggest thing to like being able to practice self-care with effectiveness and in a way that's going to have an impact on your life, a positive impact on getting your needs met, is knowing what it is that you need. Some of those needs are going to be the same for everybody. And for some people, there's going to be different needs. And for some people, we might have the same needs, but maybe like one person has a huge village of friends that they rely on. And so their love and belonging need is being met really easily. And for someone else, they may be in a new place with no friends, no connections. And so that's going to be a lot more of a need for them, right? So, really understanding what it is that you need is like number one has to happen before you can effectively practice self care. It's also really important to recognize that these needs can be ever changing. What you need today may be different than what you need next month. What you need when your child is a newborn and you're just literally surviving and you're just trying to make sure you eat and sleep and maybe take a shower, it's going to be different than what you need when your child's 1, 5, 10, right? That's going to be different what you need. And it also changes like a lot more rapidly too. You might need something currently because you're dealing with a health issue, and then 2 weeks down the road, it's cleared up and your needs look a lot different. You might be going after some personal growth goals and need to put time into that to feel fulfilled, right? So it's really important to have a routine or a practice in place to just regularly check in with your needs. This can be something like talking to a therapist or working with a coach and having regular times to just talk through what's going on in your life and what you need, journaling regularly, literally just sitting and intentionally thinking. So maybe every time you pick up your kid from daycare on Fridays, you spend like 10 minutes in the car before you go and just think, hey, where am I at? What do I need? And just really like tune into your body and your mind and what's going on and what you need in the moment so that you can like figure out how to make time for it, right? How to get those needs met. And then we can really like think about finding pockets of time or time to multitask something for you. This probably won't be, enough to take care of all of your needs. If you have a lot of needs going unmet, you may need to like actually reprioritize, but there likely are ways that you can do things for you in what you're already doing. So it could be like listening to music that puts you at peace while you're driving your kids to school, or while you're doing the dishes, listening to fiction on an audiobook that, just kind of lets you escape. And maybe you love reading and you don't get the time for it. And so it can be an act of self care to like choose purposely and intentionally to do that instead of listening to the kids screaming in the living room, right? And so there are ways that we can multitask and do these things. Um, if you have established habits and you can habit stack and just add a little quick 5-minute meditation or something like that to your already established routines, cool. Like that's amazing. Again, it usually doesn't, these little tiny movements don't necessarily make it so we're meeting all of our needs, but it can have a really positive impact in especially that normalizing of self-care, normalizing doing things for yourself, right? Like that's a really big part of it, is making it so it's not just like, ugh, got to do this for me now. And it's a lot of effort. It's like, no, we're making that a regular, consistent part of your life. And that really does make a huge difference in the mindset behind the practice, right? So then how do we get those needs met that just aren't going met, right? They're just going unmet and we need to get them met. I am a huge believer that we have to prioritize time for ourselves, even if that means after the kids go to bed and the dishes don't get done and consistently they don't get done. You have to do them in the morning while the kids are having breakfast, whatever it is. Like it may make things not ideal and there may be give and take, and you have to figure out like what the give and take is that makes the most sense for you and, makes it so that there are other needs going unmet. But we really need to prioritize that time for ourselves. Now, I want to fully recognize that not everybody has the same access to support as everybody else. And so, if you are somebody who's a single parent, or you don't have a lot of familial support, or you're working a lot and don't have much time with the kids to begin with, whatever it is, I acknowledge that prioritizing time for ourselves is not always easy. But again, there's an important mindset component here of knowing that it needs to be a priority. And I'm going to do an episode soon on priorities and really like understanding what it means to prioritize ourselves and what it doesn't mean to prioritize ourselves. But I just want to like put that in there, that it's not like a easy solution always, but we have to be prioritizing that time for ourselves to make sure our needs are getting met. Something else that I have found in my own motherhood self-care journey that has been really surprisingly impactful. And this is something that, I ask every guest we have on the podcast, how do you practice self-care for yourself? And how do you show up for yourself? And do you have tips for moms to make sure that they are caring for themselves regularly? And a lot of my guests have similar things. And I've kind of really recognized this and been able to pull it out that there's a lot of little things we can do that aren't huge changes in our lives, but that kind of compound and have a big impact. Something that's cool is that self-care, when we're practicing self-care, it's the act of caring for yourself and the act of like showing yourself love that contributes to loving yourself more. It's kind of this cycle that happens. The more you care for yourself, the more you love yourself, the more you love yourself, the more you care for yourself. And so when we add in these little tiny things, it can contribute hugely and immensely to that. So something that I was talking to someone the other day and they were saying, "Oh, I just keep my moisturizer next to my bed." And that way, when I'm going to bed, it's not like an extra thing. I'm already in bed, like laying there, just put a little moisturizer on my face, and like that's the skincare routine. It's not really all that complicated. It's just there, ready to go. And that little tiny thing, that little tiny act of care, of self-care for yourself can be huge in like the snowball effect of like I'm caring for myself and I know that I'm intentionally caring for myself. And even though it's not much effort, it still has that impact of like showing yourself love. Something that a lot of guests have said on the podcast is like enjoying time in the shower more. So, really like enjoying the smell of the soap and like caring for yourself, massaging your scalp when you wash your hair, really like allowing yourself to feel the warm water. Again, like shifting that intention of something you're already doing and making it a little bit more focused on the self care and the self love within that, right? Sitting in the car alone for 5 minutes after drop off. This is huge. This is something that I definitely do quite often, unless I'm like in a rush to the next place. I try and just kind of give myself a little bit of a break and allow myself to sit there, just sit, decompress. There's no right way to do it, but just knowing that like you have permission to take time that's not as quote productive as you might want, right? You might think like, "Oh, I have to get home and do these things." And it's like, it's okay to take a moment for yourself. It's okay to take a moment for yourself regularly. It's okay to take a moment for yourself every time you get in the car. And it's okay if that moment is not just a moment, right? We have to really like shift that mindset around what it means to be productive and what it means to like be a good mom and a good person and know that like taking care of ourselves is a big deal. And the last little piece here of what I want to leave you with as somebody who is a mom and is busy and also needs to take care of themselves is that we have to give ourselves so much grace when it comes to self care because it doesn't need to be one more thing to feel bad about. When we talk about this, we talk about the positive impacts of practicing self care, both for ourselves and for our kids and families and everybody else. Then it can sometimes feel like there's all this pressure to do it right. And if you're not doing it right, then you're letting people down. And it's not helpful. That doesn't help anybody. Again, this is like an ever-changing thing. You're never going to get it down completely. You might get down the routine of checking in with yourself completely, but there's always going to be changes you're going to make sure your needs are being met because your needs are going to change at different periods of time, right? And so we have to give ourselves grace. We have to be compassionate with ourselves in the process of practicing self-care. And that in itself, that act of self compassion, the act of being compassionate towards yourself, that is caring for yourself, right? So that is it for this episode. So happy to just kind of like zoom out and take this kind of comprehensive look at what it means to practice self care and kind of demystify some of those myths around self care that I see a lot, both in conversations and just in the way that people go about engaging with self care. So, thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful that I get to spend this time with you. Again, make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast. If you are enjoying it or learning and taking away things week after week, please leave a rating and review wherever you listen. And I will see you next week. You are worthy, Mama.